Hi everyone, welcome to this video on identifying outcome measures. Now I'm going to keep this video pretty informal and try to make it as clear and simple as possible when looking at this important part of the process of developing interventions. So what we'll look at is just what are outcomes, why are they important, what they look like, and how do we measure them. So as I say, pretty straightforward. So first up, outcomes aren't technical details or outputs or, isolated results. What they are really observable, practical indicators of what's going on or what's expected to happen when we plan an intervention. They provide a lot of information for us in terms of how things are going, but more importantly, in terms of future planning, working out what we need to tweak and just what information we're getting along the way. They're also highly motivational tools because they show progress. We can use them as part of our success criteria or our indicators of success. Or they can show us where things aren't working and we need to maybe adjust our strategies. What they need to be is inherently linked to the key issues that we've identified as part of our initial assessment and looking at the information we have available, trying to identify what the key issues are. And then as we transfer those into what smart goals or incorporate them into strategies, we are going to build in to those into the approaches we use these outcome measures. And they've got to be also easy to understand. Now, partly that's part of the observation side of things, but also because this is very much part of communicating what we're doing, why we're doing it, how we're going to show that it's working. So it needs to be understood by individuals, it needs to be understood by parents, by teachers, by community workers, by siblings, by anyone that's involved as part of an intervention that we might be planning. What are they not? And this is an important distinction, I think. They're not exclusively a measure of success. And what I mean is they do show us where we're making progress. But when I'm talking about success, I'm talking about a specific measure of success that's often used. What I mean by that is that sometimes success measures are externally prescribed by organisations for funding, for whatever reason, and they're unrelated to the individual intervention. I'll give you an example. When I was running the suspension centre, it could have been imposed that a level of success is how students were going back at school, not getting suspended again. That would be a measure of success of the program, but it wouldn't help me with the intervention because what I wanted to know is the details of what was happening when they were going back to school and how the supports we were providing for them were affecting their ability to improve their academic engagement, improve their results, reduce the number of incidents that were happening at school, reduce the severity of those incidents or, increase the time between incidents, things like that. Often, or success measures can actually constrain a program. If my funding was dependent on proving that kids did not get suspended again when they went back to school, then what that would mean is that as part of my intake program, I would tend not to take those kids that were highly unlikely to have success with to that extent. So, if your program is geared on your output or showing what you're performing, then you tend to change the parameters by which you choose your participants and work with them. And that can be make programs look very, very good on paper, but if there is genuine need in the community for support and for intervention, then you are excluding the very people who most likely need it most. So that's what I mean by that. So what they really are an indication of progress or value added. Looking at the issues you started with and how they've been addressed, and how that has progressed over time. One thing that also needs to be noted is that they may be productive even if little change is measured. So you may put in strategies as a result of the measured outcomes. What happens is, as part of that process, the individual and the other people involved, whoever they might be, the parents, teachers, become more aware and attuned to certain issues around which the strategy was designed. And so that information, that provides a lot of information that can be used for the next step. Now that awareness has been generated, that we are now ready to move on and be a little bit more productive or a little bit more ambitious in how we plan for the future. So these are important considerations to just realise what we're trying to do, what we're not trying to do. So why are they important? Well, a whole range of things. They do really identify when strategies and actions are not working so that you can try other options. So they give us that ability to look and measure that. They provide that direction and awareness that I was just talking about. So because they're practical, because they're the observations are important, that they're actually something useful that we can do. The measure of success, to see where things have changed, especially in the positive, provides a great deal of encouragement. That feedback really provides some recognition for the individual and for other people involved to really build on. And it's important to be able to communicate that, especially. And that's where outcome measures can be really good, because they are we can use them to generate that information and have that communication. So if someone is making some general comment about a person that may be a judgmental, we can actually provide them with some real information to show what has been achieved. They're also useful because they can identify some of the short-term goals that have been achieved. Those sort of benchmarks, or those are achieved, we can move on to more ambitious goals. So that's important too. And they also build up that information base of what effective approaches can be that can be considered across groups. So, as we collate the information around the outcome measures we've used and how they've been effective, that provides us with that evidence of what is effective and how we can demonstrate that. And finally, it also provides some evidence for evaluation and reviews that show progress or that value added. So when someone asks us, is your program successful or is your intervention, we're able to communicate that. And that's an important part of the process. And all these things work together to make identifying, measures, outcome measures, really important. So what do they look like? Well, two key features of the measured outcomes or the targets. Can what is being measured be clearly observed? Now, Amanda talked about this, I think, very clearly in one of the lectures, where she said, if someone was just coming in to sort of buddy up with you on a particular situation, would whatever is being observed, whatever is being measured, would it be clearly able to be noticed by that person? So I think it has to be something that we're not interpreting, we're not having to somehow try to intimate what's going on, that it's very clear that we can actually see it. And also we need to look at how it will be measured. You know, we're looking at changes in frequency, we're looking at changes in intensity, behavior changes, and how performance has changed as well in whatever section, whatever it is we're looking at. So we can measure it in lots of different ways, and we'll have a look at this in a moment. Measured outcomes, they'll always need to be individualized because we're looking at the specific issues that we've identified. So even if we're using more formal assessments, we need to be able to tweak those for the individual conditions that we're working with, and that will always be different. So while there's some consistency, we really need to be more flexible and more adaptive in how we design things. The last thing that's really important when we're designing the measured outcomes is to really get that consultation and agreement with the individual and other stakeholders. That's part of the design, so that's all integrated. So it's number one, it's understood what we're aiming to do, but everyone can be on the same page in terms of how it's consistently applied. And that's really important in terms of the ongoing validity of what we're doing. Really, how do we measure outcomes? And this is really, it's what we're trying to do is notice what's happening. And noting and recording observations are really important. We've got a whole range of tools to do that. We can use both formal and informal. So examples of the formal ones might be reading comprehension assessments, you know, and the whole range of those. Behaviour assessment systems, again, a whole range of those. You know, academic tests, and looking at the formal ones, we may have to adapt them in some way to in terms of how they're administered, to make them more relevant to the particular circumstance and the particular individual we're working with. Now, informal assessments will make up the bulk of how we use these, and that's going to be, you know, things like developing observational checklists, or using the ABC charts and just recording a number of incidents over different times and different places. Using rating scales to look at intensity or changes in intensity, or changes in anything that we're really looking at measuring, which the rating scales provide a good indication, a good empirical indication of changes that are made. Frequency tally as well, you know, give us an idea of how often things occur. You know, work samples, again, provide us evidence of change. School reports can provide both more a long-term and sometimes a shorter-term way of seeing where progress is made at a whole heap of levels, from performance to comments that are made to observations by teachers, all sorts of things. And also just setting out specific performance indicators that we're looking at, seeing how they're achieved over time. So setting those out, but again, making sure that they're clear, they're understood by everybody, and they're openly observable and recordable. It's also worth noting that different tools that we use may be more relevant at different stages of an intervention. So if we're seeing changes being made, we may need to adapt and respond to those changes and look at different levels of observation or different elements that we're observing, just to keep up with the changes in the intervention and how that's affecting the person. So really, this brings us to the end of this fairly short discussion of this. But some of the considerations in the use of the tools are, how valid are they? It measures what it's meant to do. So that's where it needs to be clear, and that's where it needs to be communicated. It needs to be reliable so that it can be used in different situations by different people, but it's, they're understood and they're universally comparable. Is it responsive to change? Is another thing, because as we said, if interventions are effective, we need to move along the outcomes in the way we're measuring and noting that, and be responsive to it. And is it acceptable to everybody? And that's really important, again, because it will determine in some ways how well it's adopted, and how well understood it is for everybody to use. So that is just really, in a nutshell, what we're looking at in terms of identifying outcome measures, because it really is about making sure that we can nail what it is we're doing and what it is we're trying to do, and providing some clear, observable ways of recording how it's progressing over time, for whatever reason that might be valid. I mean, and the most valuable one, of course, is just to provide that feedback to everyone involved, that where things are going in terms of what we're trying to achieve. So thanks for listening, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.